Presented by Litify, I'm Bill Biggs, and this is Transforming the Culture of Law. Guys, we have had some incredible guests on this show. I don't know if any one of them, while they're all amazing, I don't know if any of them have had a story to tell, a message that they've lived and experienced that is any more deeply rooted in who they are and their identity and their ability to share it so well than Merril Hoge. Merril is a phenomenal speaker to many people across the country. His message is taking root and grabbing hold into a lot of hearts and minds across the country. Many of you know him as a Pittsburgh Steeler, a Chicago Bear, a man that was on the gridiron for years, an incredible athlete, incredible running back, in an incredible line and history of running backs, particularly with the Steelers, even though I'm a Cowboys fan. But not only, was he great on the gridiron, in my opinion, he was given that platform so he could share this message. So Merril, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. We want to talk today about what it means to find a way. That's a part of your message. And, our job, our goal here, what we do in this podcast is we are working with people, particularly in the legal space, but we're gaining listeners and viewers from across multiple different spaces, multiple different industries. We talk about culture. We talk about leadership. Our mantra is for leadership, whether it's in legal or any other spaces, love your people and then demand high performance. If you love your people, if you genuinely take care of your team, then you earn the right to say we have to reach to the highest level, and people want to be coached. They want to be pushed. That's one of the foundations of culture. We believe culture is critically important to high performing championship level teams, setting that tone, setting that pace. And so you've been a part of teams like that, and you've seen what it's like, probably in multiple levels. But your personal story of being a cancer survivor that you have now turned into this powerful message of life, of how to live life and find a way, is why we're having you on the show today. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about where this find a way message came from and why it's so important to you.
Well, thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Like the opportunity anytime I have a chance to share a message and open people's mind. I was asked one time, well, why do you say you're opening people's mind? And I said, because you can never change a person's mind. You don't have that right. You don't have that power. Only people can change their minds. And so if you can give them a way to think of things and open their mind, then that's their choice to change their mind. And I don't believe in I'm gonna change your mind. I think it's intrusive. And opening people's mind is just a more pleasant way for me to talk about my message, because I'm a product of a lot of people who have challenged me, people who have inspired me. And what you hope is that somebody's listening and they can grab something from what you're sharing and apply it to their life. That's the goal. It is not like when we're done here, if people are talking about our conversation versus what they can do, then like we failed, because we want people to take that and use it. So really find a way has helped me live a dream and fight to live. And a lot of in between, quite honestly. It's instrumental in my everyday makeup. But it all started when I wrote a goal down. I'd heard this as a kid. Well, first of all, this happened to everybody, no matter what your age. You either did it to yourself or somebody did it to you. They asked you, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? Well, I was asked that at 8 years old. I had no clue. A long story short, this is 1973, so I have to paint a picture of 1973. And in 1973, not everybody had televisions. Okay, and if you did, it was an antenna, there was 2 knobs, 3 channels. And you had to make sure you knew the right channel before you laid on the couch, because there's no remotes.
Yeah, and there's probably some aluminum foil on the antenna, right?
And then, right. So if that's in the basement, then you have to get reception. So that's what you do. Okay, so there's your picture of 1973. Now, if your parents come in the room, well, you are the remote. So that's the only way that you had a remote. Now, that being said, we could not have our television on Sunday. So it was when I went to my grandparents' house, because they always had their television on. It's the first time I saw football on television. And I'd been doing that in the backyard. And I'd been asked, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh my gosh, that. like that. I'm like, I had no idea these cats are doing it on television. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And that set me on a journey, quite honestly. There was another thing I heard as a kid. I don't know if it was popular then or still is, but it was, I thought it was powerful. I always thought it was a great idea. I heard teachers always say, write your goals down, write it where you start and end your day, put it in your bedroom. And I always thought that was a fantastic idea. Actually, I did try that, but I had a little brother in a bunk bed and he was always tearing everything down. And that's why I'd pray every night that one or both would disappear so that I could have my own room. And that doesn't mean I don't love my little brother. I always wanted my own sanctuary. And I used to lay there at night. I would daydream this and it would take me to sleep many nights. If I had my own room, there was one thing that I wanted. I wanted a wall of cork. And the reason I wanted that, because I have junior high, high school, college to attend. And I always envisioned that I'd have a goal for junior high. I'd have a goal for high school. I'd have a goal for college, and those things would be like start as a junior high, start as a sophomore, start as a freshman in college, get drafted, play in the National Football League. So at the top is I will play in the NFL. My favorite player was Walter Payton. My favorite player was the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we had a basement in Idaho that was our playground in the wintertime. Well, one night my dad announced that that's going to be converted to a bedroom, 2 bedrooms, a family room, and an office. And one of those bedrooms was going to be mine. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, can you make me a wall of cork? He's asked why. I explained. He said, I'll see what we can do. There was no guarantee there, but I just wrote my goals down. The room does get done. He did make me half a wall of cork. And I'm going to tell you that was big enough. And it was when I pinned those goals up and I was looking at, I will play in the NFL, that honestly, there's so many things that happened on that in that day. Most I didn't realize till later. But the one thing that clearly happened when I was sitting there looking at I will play in the NFL, I just started revisiting all the things people had said to me. Everybody that had asked me what I'm going to do. And every time I responded, they'd say, oh gosh, you know how hard that is? You're at the odds, you playing in the NFL, sorry. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, son. I wouldn't want you to be disappointed. Or it was impossible. And it's probably like, it's because of those things and many others why I see things through a child's eyes. The people who were supposed to encourage me were the first ones to discourage me. But it speaks to young people. They have so much resilience. Like I had never fazed by that. But it does lead me to that moment of truth. I'm 12 years old. I'm looking at that goal and I'm revisiting all the things people had said. And when I have a chance to go back to that, I can almost go back to that moment of time, the energy. Just, I will play in the NFL, nothing more than words on a wall. Energy was gone. I'm sitting there self-reflecting. I'm thinking about how hard it is and the odds and all those things. And then the words find a way pop into my head. And it inspired one thing at that day. It did many other things, but it did the one thing that was most critical, most important for anybody, no matter your circumstance. Do something about it. Like take action, like that word action, like do something about it. And I'm telling you, Bill, even to this day, man, I got so excited about that. I had extra 8x10 cards. I write down, find a way. I put it up on top of that wall. I'm sitting there looking at it. Right below it, I will play in the National Football League. And I'm like, now what is it I got to do? I started there going, I don't even know what to do, but I'm excited about doing something. But what I end up doing initially, I went to the library and I said, who can help me? Who's good at it? And my favorite players who I start thinking about, I was like, Walter Payton's got to do something. There's probably something he's done. Now this is 1977, so it isn't like the piece of you didn't have that. Yeah, the piece of glass we all have was bolted onto a wall with a cable, and all you could do is call people. You can't text, FaceTime, and Google. Okay, so
and the cord was really curly, right?
Right, depending on how long you stretched it. Right, it's either going to go to 3 feet or 12 feet.
It was probably orange. The phone was orange.
And that's honestly, that's where it started. It just sent me on a journey, and those words continue to resonate with me, and they inspire me to do something about my circumstances. No, rather it's a goal, a dream, a challenge, or a deadline. And what I have discovered, it's kind of simple. If you're going to do nothing, then expect nothing. That is pretty. I mean, that's the pretty simple way to explain it. You don't expect things to just drop into your lap. But if you'll do something about your circumstance, which is really a responsibility we all have, is to take responsibility for that, take the action, and you got to figure that action. You're going to know based on what your circumstances are, and do something about you. And I do something about it, and it just set me on a journey. I've discovered more things. I've learned more things. I've grown in lengths. Had I never done that, had I accepted, oh, you're right, it is too hard, the odds are against you, and done nothing, I mean, how disappointed I would be in my life, that I'd be living with a lot of regret, Bill. And I just think that's one of the things I don't want to live with. And those words do that. They constantly challenge me, do something. You're responsible for that. Do something. And I'm grateful for that, because they've helped me live a dream too. They're just supposed to, I mean, they're supposed to just help me live a dream, but they've helped me fight to live too.
Absolutely. And would you consider yourself an underdog getting into the NFL?
Well, based on when I was drafted and the circumstances around me, I was drafted in the 10th round. They don't even have 10 rounds to this day.
Right. That's
So
right.
that pretty much sums it up right now. And we just get done doing the draft, and when you get into like the 5th, 6th, and 7th round, it's harder to make the team, there. So we're not even into 10.
Right. They say, right, that the last guy that's drafted at the end of the 7th round, now it's Mr. Irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
You weren't even you weren't even up to Mr. Irrelevant.
Mr. Irrelevant was way ahead of me.
That's right. All right. So you're an underdog. You end up starting for the Steelers. You have a great career. You go on to ESPN, a few steps within the NFL, but a great career with the Steelers, a great career in the NFL. You've made a phenomenal impact at ESPN. But there's another piece to this find a way message that has to do with your personal life. And you said, find a way to live. Tell us about that, because cancer is, that diagnosis scares the hell out of all of us.
Yeah. Well, listen, if I gave you the option to have cancer and open heart surgery, most people would select neither. Those are not, those things. I think both of them, had you presented to me prior to, well, I know this for a fact. I'm fearing all of them. I mean, in both of them, I was like, but I never had to worry about that. There's nothing in my family history. I was in optimum health. I mean, that is the furthest thing from my mind ever happening. In fact, I had just got done reading a book almost a month before my diagnosis. And I remember reading, and I can't remember the book. I just remember the description of it and how brutal it was. And I've seen the movie Dying Young. And so that vision of chemotherapy and dying, was embedded in my head. And I remember thinking, gosh, I'm glad I ain't got to carry that cross. I'm not equipped to do that. That's beyond my skill set. And I remember closing the book thinking, I never have to worry about that. That's just not something that ever come my way. And a month later, I was faced with it. And it's not one dark day. I call it the dark days of diagnosis. Like the day you get the bad news, it doesn't end there. I mean, it just seems to get worse and worse and darker and darker.
Wow.
And I Find a Way has been a parenting tool for me. And I talk about leadership, and I always tell people, if you have kids, that is the greatest leadership role you will ever play in your entire life, is being a parent. I don't care how big a company you operate. I don't care how many people answer to you, and I don't care what your operation is. Being a parent is the greatest leadership role you can ever have. And in that leadership role, this is true in the business world, in leadership. The two things that are most significant about a truly good leader, one is modeling. How that person moves, acts, and the things that they are seen doing is way more powerful than what they say.
Yeah.
And then integrity, the ability, because everybody gets exposed for integrity at some point. It's better to be exposed for having it than not having it. And, Find a Way has done a lot of things for me. It's challenged me to self-reflect, look at myself, try to break chains and not pass them on. That's where I became passionate about a parent. And my kids I love them without end. Even though they're moved on and married and I got grandbabies, that has not changed. That relationship continues to grow. It's just in different levels and layers. And cancer actually saved my life. And I don't get to talk about this much when I'm speaking, because it's too hard to explain. There's not enough time. When you got 45 minutes, it's just too hard to explain it. But if I don't have cancer, my aorta defect is never is never found. Well, let's put it like this: is how they would have discovered my aorta defect. This is how my doctor explained it. And this is after I'm laying there on a Friday after open heart surgery. When I'm actually Thursday night before I checked out Friday. The surgery was Monday. I just happened to ask him. I'm like what have I known? Like I had a symptom. He's like, well, you would never. He goes, here's where you would have known in your autopsy.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You would never have had a symptom. And they discovered it on my last PET CAT scan 5 years after my final treatment. Somebody new was looking at my scan that hadn't looked at it before, and the aorta caught his eye. I don't even know why he was looking there, and I don't know how it was missed. But this guy, for some reason, chose to notice the abnormality, and he brought it to our attention. Had that not happened, so and you have to have, in order to find that, you would have, people go, a stress test would not have found it. You have to have a stress test and an echocardio. Now, in order to get the echocardio, you almost have to know something's wrong.
Yeah.
So that's not really a normal thing. And so I could have done a stress test, walked out, and went, now that's the healthiest 50-year-old we've ever seen, and been dead in a year. Wow. From a ruptured aorta. So as brutal as chemotherapy was, and as brutal as that year and a half of treatment and the plank that has to be walked for that, without it, I'm not alive. Without it, I don't have a perspective now that I didn't have before, and that's all I would have missed. And I say this genuinely, like I'd have missed this opportunity. I'd have never met you, Bill. I'd have never had a chance to come to Chicago. My life would have been over 20 years ago. And I think about that often because I've lost a lot of dear friends, Stuart Scott, Walter Payton, who impacted my life, even though it wasn't cancer. He died way too young, and all he has missed. I think about those Sam Mills, people that are dear friends that had kids about my age and where my kids are now, grandkids. My kids were 9 and 7 at the time. They're now 29 and 27 with 4 grandbabies. I was like, just in that scope of things, like heart-wrenching, and I think about that often. And so to share my message with people, you try to get help, maybe to understand. Now, listen, it's not easy, because to sit there and try to, I used to actually, when I set that book up, I was like, oh, what would it have, could you really imagine what it's like to have cancer? No way. I mean, I was thinking about those things, and being told you have cancer, that's the only way that you can know.
That you can imagine having. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as much as you try to imagine how you might think, how you might feel, what it might feel like, you just can't do it. The reality of it is so brutal. And then I was like, it's probably a good thing people can't, because it's overwhelming, and it's a dark space. And I wouldn't want that for anybody, because it is an arduous cross to bear, and it can be overwhelming from here, and it's taxing too physically. But
sure,
to be able to share to people and give them something, a little, maybe just a hint of perspective they may not have had, to help them a little bit appreciate where they are, and go find out, get something deeper in here they may be missing that's in there. Just go get it. That's what the message is really about, to help people do that.
Well, and Merril, that's incredible. When I heard it first, I knew of you because I'm a huge football fan. I knew of you well before I knew your story. And then when I dug into your story, I started seeing things on social media. I was very intrigued, because I thought this message of find a way that Merril has harnessed, not only professionally and in life, but also for survival, literally. It is actually amazingly appropriate and applicable to leadership, and to those who are in a position where they've got big challenges. They're trying to take a team or a full organization through COVID, or through a down market, or through difficult times, or through they're inheriting something that bad, that may have bad culture. There's always challenges as a leader, and I think most leaders, if they're truly called into leadership, in some ways they're wired. They want to solve problems. They want to overcome those challenges. But something about your message that resonates with me is, you and I were talking about this before the show, and I want you to jump right back into where we were there, that, you know, I always say, even though it's not socially acceptable as much now, but I always say, look, in leadership, no victims allowed. You can't carry a victim mentality, even though many of us have been, you know, people have been victimized. Bad things have happened to all of us. Some worse things. Cancer is not fair. Terrible events that happen in people's lives. Victimization is not fair. Yet, at some point, we have to take control of our lives. Find a way. To me, your message resonates so much because it pulls me out of being a victim. It pulls me out of letting circumstances dictate who I am. So tell me about that. Tell me about that connection there, the victim mentality that we talked about earlier. You mentioned 3 things that of how you define that. Powerful stuff.
Well, you know, listen, I have 2 experiences of being a victim too. So listen, I speak from experience. This isn't like, I try to tell people, I don't share things I read, saw, or somebody told me. I really share things I've lived. And those are the most powerful because you can speak to the truth of them and the reality of them. I'm working on a book right now. You know, I've already written one book titled Brainwashed, and it's about the physical trauma that and the awful science behind it and all of the misleading facts behind it versus what the science really says. Well, that's the physical side of head trauma. Then there's the emotional trauma of head trauma that is a bigger scope, much bigger than the physical. And those effects can be very similar from an emotional and a cognitive effect on a human being. So the book is going to be titled ACEs. Some people maybe understand what ACEs are: adverse childhood experiences. And all of us probably experienced some ACEs in our journey. Then there are things like, you know, you have a death in the family. Well, I lost my mom at a young age. You can have abandonment. I mean, you can have physical abuse, mental abuse. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that you go through. There's 10 things. And then you size up how many ACEs you have. And then the more ACEs you have, you know, the bigger chance you have is having some emotional issues and cognitive issues later in life. That's just scientifically a fact. So I was raised in a very tough environment from that perspective. There's a lot of ACEs that I had. When my daughter was born, I had a moment of truth where I had a chance to do one of 2 things. Either was going to continue to be a victim and I was going to pass it on, or I was going to take ownership and I was going to break a chain. I was going to accept. I mean, actually, ownership gives you freedom. Okay.
Absolutely.
Ownership, like what happened to me as a kid is not on me. But if I'm going to pass it on here, shame, I think that is one of the most tragic things to ever do, because here's why. Who knows it better than you? Who knows it better than me? And I'm going to choose to pass that on. I know what that feels like at 5 years old or 12 years old, to be kicked down the hallway and beat, neglected. I mean, all these things. Now, do I want to really do that? I mean, that's why like people go, well, that's how I was raised. Shame on you. Absolutely shame on you. That is an excuse.
Because you know it better than anybody, right?
Right. It isn't. So I know, because
right.
listen, I was the same boat. And then you've chosen to point fingers, cast blame, and make excuses. Shame on you, because you are accountable. And that's why ownership is such a powerful thing, because it's freedom. You are breaking a cycle.
Yes.
You are breaking a chain, and you're not going to pass it on. You know how powerful that is? And that is 100% on you, those people that have experienced so many ACEs. So that was one experience that I had. Now, when my career ends in Chicago, ironically, I'm in the middle of the season. Okay, I just signed a 3-year deal with the Chicago Bears. My favorite player plays. I mean, I'm playing for 2 favorite franchises as a kid. I'm in my prime. I'm 30 years old, and my career is over. I went from, I mean, riding about as big a wave. And I was this guy in the 2nd year of free agency, and I was one of the highest sought after free agents. I mean, I know what it feels like to be a first rounder too, even though I was a 10th round pick. I just know how that feels now. I did have good experience, and it's over half a season into it. I lose my purpose. I have no value. I got nothing that is valuable. I lay on the couch for weeks doing this, pointing fingers, casting blame, and making excuses. How could the doctor mistreat me like that? I'm doing all of what I just said victims do. I'm playing the victim card. with everything I got.
Yep.
In one of the darkest days, I'm laying on the couch, and it's almost like this little light of hope. It was almost, it's like I talk about self-reflection. Okay. I wasn't trying to self-reflect, but it just couldn't help but hit me in the face. You're responsible. If anything's going to get better, you got to get your butt up off the couch.
Yeah.
I've already not returned a bunch of calls. I've already had people reach out to me, and I've ignored all of them. Why? Because woe's me. Pointing fingers, cast the blame, make excuses. That was a lot more enjoyable laying on that couch. But it was that moment that one of the darkest days, Bill. I was like, "You're an idiot. This is on you." And that was probably my biggest day of ownership. And it's not easy. It was hard as hell to get off that couch and not keep doing that. Trust me. I'm not going to say, "Oh, I just took ownership and then everything went great."
Right.
No, I get off the couch and I'm like, okay, I got off the couch and I knew in my gut I was responsible for this. I was got to move on from this. I keep doing this. I'm going nowhere but staying on that couch. A guy that had reached out to me. Now think about this. He'd reached out 2 weeks ago. I hadn't returned his call. Was Lynn Swan. Because I was going into broadcasting and he was already in broadcasting, and he left me a message that they were going to be in Champaign, Illinois, Michigan, and Illinois were going to play. And he wanted to know if I wanted to come out and basically shadow them for a couple of days, watch how the thing worked. Think about that opportunity. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm ignoring it. Just think how foolish that is. But it happens before this game. And thank goodness I woke up. That was my first call. I called him up. I accepted the opportunity to go. Thanked him. I had somebody drive me to Illinois, Champaign, Illinois, and I shouted him. Keith Jackson, Bob Greasy, and Lynn Swan for that game. Exactly. And you know what? And then it started. Then I started to move forward. I started to gain a little bit of traction. But it all comes down to taking ownership first. You are responsible for the first move.
Yeah.
And I can't emphasize that enough. People said, "Hey, listen."
It's not just the first one, right? What I hear when you say that is it is a constant. You got to take ownership to get off the couch. Then you got to take ownership to make some calls back. Then you got to take ownership to get on the plane. Then you cannot stay mired. It is a constant. It's like someone who deals with addiction. That's not a one-time decision to break.
Exactly.
That's not
very true.
right. It's every day. It's ongoing. And coming out of all of us, whatever our level of victimization is, whatever our level of helplessness is, whether it was imposed on us or whether we're bringing it out from ourselves, imposing it on ourselves, saying, "Nope, I'm going to decide today not to be a victim." You defined it in 3 ways, or you defined victimization, like the victim mentality, pointing fingers, casting blame. And what was the third one? Making excuses. Making excuses. We've only got a couple of minutes here to close up, Merril. Those 3 realities of how often that happens in the life of a leader, how often that you want to fall on that. You want to blame your team. You want to blame your team member. You want to blame the market forces. You want to blame external situations for why things aren't going your way. You're pointing the finger in multiple different directions. And the easy way out is to make excuses, is to give a reason, to rationalize failure, to rationalize the bad decisions that you make. But just as in life, working with teams, working with people, being a leader, the same principles apply, right? If you're going to succeed, and you got to define what that looks like, but if you're going to succeed, you can't allow those things to turn you into a victim. And because once you become a victim, you lose control. And you're so right. I've said this so many times, and I love the way you said it. It's not your fault. You're not responsible for what happened to you, right? But you have to own your life. Nobody else is going to do it. You got to own your life. So for leaders, a lot of things happen. A lot of things happen in the daily life of a leader that maybe it's not your fault, but it's your problem.
Yeah, Bill. When I coached football and all sports, but football I've coached anywhere from 8 to 38. I ran a pro league with Mike Sherman. You guys might remember him in Chicago. For the Packers, Mike Sherman. We ran a league called Football where we put technology on display where fans could call our plays. But we were running like pro style football. There was some, we didn't have special teams. You couldn't blitz as much, but it was pro football. We're developed, but we had pro players. And I was the head coach of one team. And my head coach is a leader. You're a leader of men. And I put this on my desk. In fact, it sat on the desk. If you sat in front of me, if you come into my office, I had a wooden, about my buddy who's really good with art and wood, and carved it out. And it says, "Don't bring me excuses, bring me solutions."
Mm-hmm.
Before anybody opens their mouth, I go, "You read that, right?" It's always funny, the person that had all kinds of excuses lined up, they have nothing to say for a minute. They start thinking about things, and they're like, But we garnered more by that with the people. If you establish that right off the bat, don't even let excuses start. Okay. I mean, that's not going, we're going nowhere with that. Never have. Nobody could ever tell me that they have been successful, peacefully successful, truly successful by making excuses every day, by pointing fingers every day. I've never heard it in business. I've spoken to thousands of businesses and companies, successful people, successful companies. Mm-hmm. I've never heard it one time. I've never said, like, we pointed fingers and cast blame and made excuses all the way to the top. Never heard it. I've never heard it. I've never heard it.
Not the path.
Taking ownership and accountability. And like, I don't think we can emphasize it enough. Like, ownership is freedom. Like when I took ownership, I mean,
that's it, man.
There's a freedom to that. It's like, it's over. Okay. It is over now. Okay. I'm breaking that chain. The cycle is over. Yep. Now I have a chance to create something completely new. That is always on me. And it's going to be fresh and powerful and things that I want to live in. And that's how, if you can get people into thinking like that and realize you're in charge. Okay. You're in charge. I mean, that's a powerful thing. I'll leave you with this. It's actually when I set one of the first things I found after I put that goal up out playing the NFL, and I went to the library looking for Walter Payton. I stumbled across this. It ends up becoming the foundation of my journey. Most powerful thing I've ever read. I don't even know how I stumbled across it, but I'm a C student, so accidents happen as a C student. But it's Aristotle. I didn't know who Aristotle was at the time, and I read his stuff. I don't even know why I read it, but I read long enough, and I was interested enough that I come across the quote. Ends up being the foundation of my journey. It's still pivotal to this day, and it's powerful. We are what we repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit. You are what you repeatedly do. Like, that is powerful, okay? Because that is 100% in control. How we program our mind, patterns we're developing, habits that we want to create, how we're going to feed our mind on a consistent basis. That's all on me. That's all on you. However you choose to do that, empowered by that. I live by that quote. I love that quote. I think about it all the time. You are what you repeatedly do. That is a powerful thing. I'm in charge of that. You're in charge of that. That's an exciting thing for people. It's like, I get to do that. That's why you can change things. The self-reflection aspect, such an important part of growth. Doesn't mean that you're doing the wrong. I mean, you might be doing the wrong thing. That's why you check on yourself. I'm like, I got to do something different. I'm going to make a change. It's not a chance to do excuses. It's like, I'm going to make a change. And then I'm going to create a different plan, and I'm going after it. That's what it's about.
Merril, thank you. That is so good.
So many of us, maybe we haven't been victims of terrible trauma or abuse, or maybe we haven't been victims of cancer or horrible diagnoses, but we all can play the victim at times. We can all take on a victim mentality and believing that stuff is so much out of our control and that we can't do anything about it and it's somebody else's fault, and just leads to despair. It leads to low performance. It leads to lack of satisfaction in life. So for what I hear, what turned me on to your message was you're going up against a foe that, is life-threatening, can take everything away from you. But your message is find a way. And I believe it was your daughter. Was it your daughter that when you got the diagnosis said, Daddy, you got to find a way.
Yeah.
The power of that message to me, as it applies to people who are experiencing daily challenges, much less significant than yours, is we all have a tendency to think that variables are out of our control, or and I'm cautious with this, but I also believe it passionately. We all have a tendency to kind of fall into playing the victim and allowing the world to happen to us rather than us happening to the world. So when I talk about this on the stage, I talk a lot about my experience with trauma victims, and just the amazing. It's not fair that somebody says cancer isn't fair, life isn't fair. But if you're going to win, if you're going to overcome, no matter what that outcome looks like, ultimately, none of us know where our life is ultimately going to end and when, but control as many variables as possible. Don't be a victim, take control of your life. And that's find a way to me.
Yeah.
So,
well, no, well, Bill, I don't know if you probably don't know this. I'm actually working on a book right now, and actually I'll show you the link because it falls in line with what you're doing. It'll actually help you. Conceptually, you are spot on from this perspective. Like there's a thing called ACEs. It's called Adverse Childhood Experiences. And those are trauma experiences that can be experienced in the home. Things like divorce, death, neglect, things that can go on in the home. And there's a test that you can take. And, there's actually two, there's environmental and exterior from a social perspective. And those traumas are real. I've experienced that as a kid. Like I was raised in a real tough home. I went to a counselor one time. She wrote a book on mental health, and I went there and signed up because her book that I had read was about how you really tap into the mind and even become stronger, which I've always believed in this term. Do you control your mind, or does your mind control you? Because ultimately there we are as a human race. The greatest tool known to mankind is here, but who controls it? Do you control it, or does it control you? And that's truly a battle that, everybody deals with at some point with some issues. So what was interesting about the conversation with her is she asked me, the first question out of her mouth was, when's the last time your mom put her arms around you and said she loved you? And I was like, what? It's like, and unfortunately, my mom died when I was young. And I was like, well, she at that point, she'd been dead for almost 10 years. And she said, I'm sorry. And she said, well, let me ask you this. When's the last time your dad did that? And I'm like, well, once my mom died, I understand this thing of death and how that can wreck a family, change lives, and redirect things. He got remarried and really kind of moved on. And he never did that anyway. I go, he's never done that. And then, I haven't talked to him in 10 years at that point, almost 9 years, actually. And she said, oh my gosh. She goes, I'm sorry. And she goes, well, you got kids? I got, yeah, I got 2 kids. And she goes, well, let me ask you this. When's the last time you did that? And I'll never forget, I looked at my clock, it was 9:17. I had to be there at 9. And I said about 45 minutes ago before I walked out the door. And she said, what? She said, how'd you know how to do that? I was like, what do you mean? What? I know how to do that. Well, then she started talking about like how important a role is in family and the development of a kid. Okay. So the female's role to a male is very important at that they're appreciated and loved. They get greater force there. It's just like a male to a female, like to my daughter, what I do for her, how I build her up, this love and support that she feels from me is going to be a little more significant than what her mom gives her. And then vice versa with my son, Bo. Okay. Well, I'd never even thought about that. It was just, it was an eye opener to me, but I was like, man, the second I saw my daughter, man, all I knew is that she was never going to feel like me. That's also when I saw her, like she was never going to be like that. Now I'm gonna fast forward when my career ended to all the things that you were just talking about, being a victim. Okay. I call it, people can do, when you're a victim, you're doing these 3 things. You're pointing fingers, you're casting blame, and you're making excuses. Okay. That's a toxic environment. You will never be successful in that environment. The reason I know it so well, when my career prematurely ended in Chicago, I lost my purpose. I had no hope. I was worthless, and I had nothing that was worth anything. And I would lay on the couch in literal darkness. And I was going to send me to counseling, did absolutely nothing for me too, which is a whole nother subject that we could talk about. Not that counseling can't help some people, but I'll tell you what happened. I'm about a month into it, and it was some of the darkest days I've ever had in my life. And I remember feeling this, you got a responsibility, get your ass off the couch. And now in retrospect what I did and what you were just talking about. And you can't, at some point, somebody has to, you got to take ownership. Ownership does not mean it's my fault. Okay.
Absolutely.
Ownership, I cannot, ownership means this: freedom for me to start over, freedom for me to now create some different pattern, to actually break a chain and end the cycle.
If we take it as opportunity, it breaks chains. It's freedom. Just what you said. It's freedom. If we live mired in it and we cast blame and we point fingers and we make excuses, then it becomes this albatross, this chain, heavy chain around us, and it's a burden. Folks, Merril Hoge has been one of the best guests we've ever had. Tremendous. Thank you so much, Merril.
My pleasure.
Your message of Find a Way, to me, has translated into exactly what we're all about. Your message of Find a Way takes us as leaders from a victim mentality to an ownership mentality, because we say, all right, it's on us. It's on us to take our team where the team needs to go, to help the people we care about, who we love, and yet demand high performance from, to take them into places that they never thought that they could go before. Merril, thank you for sharing your story. Can't wait to have you in person, spend some time with you in person in Chicago, June 22nd and 23rd, the Vista Law Firm Leadership Summit. I'll be hosting that. Merril will be there with us, sharing this message of Find a Way, and some stories that you didn't hear today, and a powerful message that's transformative. We hope that you bring your leaders. Never miss an episode of Transforming the Culture of Law. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, litify.com/culture of law. And if you love this episode or any of our other episodes, please jump in and give us a good review. We appreciate you. Love your people, demand high performance, and find a way. Thanks, guys.
Hip hop.